We are here with the Raleigh Transit Authority. Meeting on Thursday, April 14th, 2022. My name is Nathan Spencer. I will be chairing this in-person meeting for the moment. Our chair is running a little behind, so I am vice chair, and I'm excited to be here with all of you in person for the first time in a long time. Because we are here in person, let's start very quickly with a introduction of folks on the at the table. So, Jen, if you want to go first and just say your name and we'll
Hi,
go down the line.
I'm Jennifer Truman.
Good afternoon, I'm Linda Davis.
Karen Ringe.
Good afternoon, LaPonda Edmondson.
Good afternoon, Latanya Williams.
Thank you very much. All right, and we will get moving. So the first item on the docket is approval of minutes. We have the minutes from March 2022. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes from March.
All right. Any discussion or second?
I'll second.
Okay. We'll go with a show of hands for all those that approve. Say aye.
Aye.
All right. That, for the record, that is unanimous. All right. So let's move on to revisions or additions to the agenda. Does staff have any additions, revisions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I do have just a quick update on transit staff, and I'm going to yield to see if anybody has any other additions or changes that I missed. We do not, so yes, I just had a quick little update on transit staffing, and we can certainly put that anywhere you like on the agenda, or I can do it now.
Let's start with that now so that we can hear that.
Yes, so as we come back together, whether we were back together in person or in virtual, we did want to share some of the changes that we've had in staffing within the transit division. Back around the end of 21, we did have Ms. Ann Galam that was with our TDM, our Travel Demand Management Program. She did move along to another position. I would have to, so as I start this out though, I'll say that throughout the city of Raleigh and nationally, we've seen certainly changes in labor patterns and very competitive market, and we have certainly experienced that as well. I like to think it's because. Pull your mic down. Okay. I appreciate it. I would like to think that's because we have such great individuals, and they're highly sought after, and I'm sure that's what it truly is. But it does make it challenging. So, but anyway, at the end of last year, Miss Ann Galam, as you know, right around the new year, Miss Mila Vega, which was in charge of our BRT program, left to go to Jacksonville Transit Authority in Jacksonville, Florida. Since then, we've also had Miss Kristen Treadway, which was in our marketing program. She has actually departed to go to the private sector. And just most recently, we've had really around the same time as Kristen, we had Miss Morgan Simmons, which went to MARTA, or Metropolitan Area Transportation Authority in Atlanta. So again, I think for each and every one of them, a brand new, exciting opportunity existed. So for that, I'm very grateful. On a selfish note, I'm also very sad because they were all, really great part of the transit team. We just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that because certainly individuals get to know us and send us emails and phone calls, and depending upon what type of activity it is, call on us. So just understand there are some voids there, but certainly in the interim, if all else fails, let me know and I'll direct you to the appropriate staff member But certainly, we're getting all of these positions filled just as quick as we can. And when we have something positive to show on that side, we'll be back before you. So just wanted to bring you up to date on that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Just a couple quick questions. Right now we're in a time when people are changing jobs quite a bit for all sorts of reasons. So we see that a lot, and all of those people are definitely experienced and deserve, no matter exactly what they ask for in terms of their skill set. So I don't question their move. I did want to know, in every one of these situations, there's always a good opportunity for bodies like ours or staff to learn some of the benefits and changes from that. Was there anything in any of them leaving that we could have learned from, maybe the way that we conduct business as a board, or staff manages, or stuff like that we can make changes to better serve our current employees and future employees?
Yeah, I certainly think, that there's many, obviously, advancement, better opportunities, room for growth, were certainly reasons for these positions. Are there other, things that are there? I'm sure that there are, contributing factors to those as well. Yeah, so I mean, I'll leave it at that. I think that certainly there's other contributing factors that some individuals want to consider as they look elsewhere. But
Okay. All right, and I know that the board's been a hard one to swallow for a while, so I think that if the board has had any impact on our retention, that should be something that we should be able to discuss and be able to find ways to work with staff a little more and figure out the best ways for staff to be comfortable.
yeah, certainly in the labor market that we're in, whether it's Raleigh as an organization, me as a supervisor, or any of the supervisors that we have, or this board, we have responsibility to try to retain our employees. The employees we have are the most important ones we have. They've been, we put a lot of resources into training and bringing people up to speed, and just by their virtue of being here, they're outstanding individuals. So certainly, it's a collective responsibility for us to try to retain who we have, and we're going to do our best to do that.
Okay.
And
Well,
I'm
if there's anything
committed to
that
working with the board to
we
do
as a
that,
board
yeah.
can do to benefit that, please let us know.
All right, thank you.
I did forget one thing in terms of additions for the agenda. I did want to take I'm sorry.
I just had one question before you moved on.
Yeah, pull your microphone down.
Microphone. My question was, and I think we discussed this a little bit when you brought it up in committee, just what the current capacity is. That's a lot of staff, but what's the percentage of staff that seats are currently open? Is it 25% or 30%?
Right at 25% of our primary administrative staff.
Okay, which just helps us also understand and be thoughtful towards you guys' current capacity, if we understand that.
We don't want to work you all to death, and I know David can't do all the planning because it's all the talent and the rest of the staff. And anyway, is there any other questions or?
I have a question about the agenda.
Okay.
For all the committee reports, I noticed that all three say BRT quarter update, equity fund, and annual work plan. I mean, is that, we're not going to go over that 3 times.
No, but we just wanted to put that down, that they were presented at all 3 committees. So we did just make sure that we put those into all 3, just in case there were some differences in opinion regarding any report out. Yeah.
That's good.
I did also want to take a moment to add one thing that I'd like to address before we get into the meat of our agenda that's on the screen. This past Sunday, there was a tragic accident with one of our Go Raleigh buses and a family, and I wanted to take a moment of silence for the family, and also acknowledge the fact that this is not an easy time for any of them, including our operator, who I'm sure is also having a hard time with this. So if we could take just a moment. Thank you, everyone. All right. We will move to the next item of the BRT corridor update, which is also on all of the committees, as you noted.
That's correct. So I did put that into all the committees again. If there's anything that anyone wants to add or commentary after we just do a quick little presentation here, we can certainly do that. I do have the presentation again. There were some individuals that weren't at our committee meetings that weren't able to see this, but I believe everyone here was in a committee meeting. Tell me if I'm wrong. Did everybody attend a committee?
I wasn't able to.
Oh, so you weren't able to? So we'll run through this. It's not really long, so we'll go ahead and run through it again very quickly. And repetition never hurts. So,
But I've seen it outside of committee meetings, so
okay, very good.
it's very popular.
So I'll go ahead and ask Andrea to advance. So we start every BRT presentation with our quick corridor overview. New Bern Avenue, we are in advanced design or final design on that. We're on a phone call with FTA yesterday and finalizing our final grant agreement so that we can start that project. That certainly looks like it will be in construction later this calendar year, which is exciting. Southern Corridor, we're actually at 5% design currently, and that is we're waiting for a NEPA determination on the Southern Corridor. Western Corridor is much like Southern currently, but it is at about 10% design. And then our Northern Corridor is actually not in project development. So it's not actually a federal project yet. It exists as a Wake Transit project. And we have an MIS study underway, major investment study, that's just kicking off. And more to come on that. You'll see public participation types of activities, plan activities kicking off with that as we approach the summertime, or at least over the summer. So just some updates that we've given to council and into this board as well, generally about New Bern Avenue, the Northern Corridor, and certainly today we're focusing on the Western Corridor and our staff recommendation about what corridor would go next. So you saw earlier that the Western Corridor is at 10% design currently, and it is a very long corridor compared to the others from a relative sense. Southern as well as New Bern are both about 5 miles each, and the Western Corridor is 12. It has 20 proposed stations. To give you an example, the Southern Corridor has 8. So again, it is a large corridor. Next slide. Some of the capital projects in that corridor do make it quite complex in order to plan as well as to develop a cost structure in order to rate it under a federal CIG or capital investment grant ratings program. When you think about the corridor itself, starting downtown, you have South Saunders and Lake Wheeler Road, basically where Western crosses over the top of that. We are looking at a potential station there, so that would be vertical circulation that would be required for a station at that location. Anytime you talk about vertical circulation, everything gets a little bit exponentially more complicated. So you've got that. We've got the Pullen Road Bridge replacement, which would be another vertical circulation type of project with a station at that location potentially. We could stay at grade as well, but that's what we're determining now. That project is under design with NCDOT and will require us to coordinate with that design as DOT advances that. We have the pedestrian tunnel at Avent Ferry Road, which is the pedestrian tunnel from NC State to the south side of Western Boulevard. which provides connectivity to Centennial Campus for pedestrians. Another vertical circulation type of facility could be required there. We don't know. But again, watching that very closely. And then we just think about other projects out there. Go Raleigh has an enhanced transfer point around Buck Jones and Jones Franklin Road area where Western intersects with Jones Franklin. We have the Western Extension, as well as we have Maynard Road grade or railroad separation. That's a grade separated bridge for the railroad in Cary. We're not actually in that one. That's good news, but we still need to figure out where to place our station. So if that is built in the future, that we don't get in the way. The last thing we want to do is to build something and then have it impacted just after we complete. And then Cary has a very ambitious and exciting downtown multimodal facility project that we'll be coordinating with, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, the plan is certainly for us to connect BRT with Go Cary buses, regional buses, intercity rail, and commuter rail at that location, just like Union Station in downtown Raleigh. Next slide.
I have a quick question,
Yes.
David. I asked this on the Wake Med Soccer Park. I know there's no stop there. Has that been part of public comment that there ought to be a stop for the soccer park or a shuttle or something? Or is the soccer park interested in a connection with the BRT? Is the town of Cary interested in that?
And so when we went through the actual LPA selection process, we did utilize Cary's preferred LPA. So they did choose that
route.
particular alignment. That is correct. So we did work closely with them. Doesn't mean that a connection to the soccer park's not important. Certainly by utilizing the Western Extension and coming into Maynard and then taking Maynard north doesn't get us as close to the soccer park as something that would have fronted on 54, but certainly there, as you stated, there may be other opportunities there, especially as Cary, because Cary does have the Maynard Loop and other services that might be able to touch that in the future. So
It's just a major.
something to think about.
It's a major athletic facility. And I understand the constraints of going out on Hillsborough because of the railroad track and development opportunities south, but it still seems like I hope we can figure out some way to connect, because if we want people to use it for that purpose.
Yep. Point well taken. Thank you. Going now to the southern corridor, 5 miles, 8 proposed stations. The dash line that you see there is also an extension or a new roadway with busway as well as general purpose lanes into the town of Garner, which is just south of Tryon Road. And then the little loop you see there is actually Garner Station Boulevard, which really does actually provide that kind of hook. And we would provide access to our existing transit stop, very highly utilized transit stop at the shopping center there at Walmart on 401 in Garner. Next slide, Andrew. This is just a quick little overview of the CIG ratings process. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth here. If anybody has questions, please let us know. But the most important thing here is if you look at the bottom right, our project is really looked at in 2 big overarching categories. One is our project justification, which looks at things like land use policy, ridership, environmental, like air quality reductions, or not reductions of air quality, but CO2 reductions, which result in better air quality, and then local financial commitment. How strong is your commitment towards the project? The greater your commitment towards the project, the better the rating is in that category. All right, Andrew?
So what is our rating then? Are we a medium?
We don't know. So right now, you can actually leave it right here, Andrea. We've got
because the
two
ratings are
we've
to
got
come.
two
Okay.
projects left in order to rate. One is the Western, we're proposing that we rate that one in 23. And then we have the Southern, which we're proposing that we rate that one this August. We've got a lot of work to do this spring into the summer in order to get the Southern ready to be rated, really developing that financial model, as well as getting all of the planning and ridership modeling done in order to submit that application. But we feel very confident that we can do that, and we also think that the Southern Corridor will rate well. So that is our proposal right now, is that we send that one forward in August of this calendar year.
And relatedly, we talked about this in committee, New Bern was medium high, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Just for general information, you have to have a medium to actually be eligible for federal funding. It goes low, medium, medium, high, high. And so as long as you're at that median or better, you are eligible for federal funding. Technically speaking, if let's say that some reason you rated and you did not get the median rating, when the federal classifications come out of all of the ratings nationally, there are some systems sometimes that don't rate. There are usually reasons why they don't rate, because whether they're testing the water or other reasons, but you will look through the list nationally, and there are projects that do rate below a medium that do not qualify. But that does not mean that project will not move forward. It can be re-rated the next year. It's just that's a once. You can submit any time in the year, but they only have a window of about a 2-month window of actually rating projects the whole 12 months. So out of the whole 12 months, they're only actively rating 2 of them. You could submit any time during the year. So even though you may see something on a federal list that says, below a medium, they can re-rate that project and make that eligible for funding.
David, since you mentioned New Bern, I noticed from the chart that we are approaching that contract construction point with small starts. I'm assuming, since I think the last number I heard was steel went up 125%, 127% at one point. Is there a cost increase for New Bern, is my first question. And related to that, do the feds share some of that increase of cost, or is that on the city itself or the system, the Wake Transit?
So I wish that was an easy answer to that. So I would say that there were some cost increases, or projected cost increases, as we got further into design. The good news, bad news about New Bern is it got funded really early. But once you get funded, you're locked into the federal request that you've requested, unless there happens to be CARES money and other funds. And so the CIG program actually got an allocation of federal funds. So we were able to get about $5.3 million additional dollars in federal funds towards the project, which keeps our federal participation pretty much right where we anticipated. So for us, that was very fortunate. The other thing that FTA, quite honestly, we didn't anticipate this, because hasn't always been the normal nationally, but FTA has required us to maintain an available, not like some I wish I had funding, but they make us or have made us have a 30% contingency available for this project. So every estimate that we have come up with, they've required us to carry for the entire project, carry a 30% balance over that. They are well aware of nationally what's happening with construction projects and things of that nature. So that's not traditional for a project to carry 30% well into 95% design, but that is where we are right now. That is good news, though, because obviously we think we're better prepared than many projects to face what's ahead. The scary thing is I don't think anybody knows exactly what's ahead yet. So that will be something we'll be following very closely.
Okay, when we have an idea more towards whether we're staying within the 35 or we're going up for our share, I'd love to hear it. And it's something that we're going to have to deal with, but we should be aware as it happens.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on BRT?
I guess one of the questions I have is around this point around the need to coordinate to make sure that efforts are moving along for the capital projects. I mean, these are going to be multi-year projects that these other initiatives are going on. So I guess what are the steps that we're prepared to take, either like strategically or tactically, to ensure that we'll be able to get to this place of getting some ratings in place by September 2023 or August? Just because those other initiatives are, I mean, they're going to be ongoing for many years, or they're not going to stop anytime soon, so.
Yeah, and you're talking the Western Corridor with the
Yes,
many
the Western
projects.
one.
Any project's going to have some intersecting projects with it. Western does have a large number of those. The good news is that things like the grade separation at South Saunders kind of slash Lake Wheeler, where they kind of come all together at Western. Poland Road Bridge is under development or designed by NCDOT. So once they come up with their base design, that gives us a baseline to understand what our future costs would be if we added something or we did something to integrate BRT. Same way with the grade separation for at Avent Ferry for pedestrians. Once we understand what their design looks like, what that cost is, we can better understand, how our stations could integrate with that pedestrian tunnel as well. So that's kind of just a quick way of saying we think, or we really hope, that these things are going to advance over the next 12 to 14 months. And so 12 to 14 months from now, we're going to be in a position where we've got that data.
Okay.
And that data can feed our cost projections for the project to a level that we have enough confidence to put in a ratings application and feel good about it. You are going to put some contingencies into that level. I mean, you're at a base level of design of 10%, 10 to 15% when you put in a ratings application usually. But it's really important for you to understand, what types of things can impact your project just as much as it is what your project will be. We can develop cross sections and costs for those, and or at least the engineers can. I can't, but certainly they can. But it's those things that are the unknowns or what makes projects at risk. And those are the things, again, we can mitigate those, we feel pretty well, over the next 12 to 14 months.
Okay. Thank you.
That was a really great question.
I have a piggyback question.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. I really appreciate that question. I was actually thinking about it in the reverse, which I think is just as useful, which is it's really important that we get that funding for the BRT in 2023. And I want to make sure that we're communicating to the other departments that are planning those other projects what their sort of decision points need to be in order to get us there. And I know you guys do a lot of that stuff internally, but I think the players in some of these projects being other municipalities, being the university and stuff like that, if there's any sort of report backs on what those critical items are to those of us that are on the board or to city council, I think we just want to make sure we stay ahead of those. And I'm thinking particularly the thing that came to my mind was the aspirational land bridge for the Dix Park planning, which certainly won't be planned in the next 12 months, right? It's really an aspirational part of that master plan, right? Whereas the Avent Ferry pedestrian tunnel might be. And I think that as keeping those things in mind, but also keeping other people in other departments accountable to what the BRT needs is an important part of this. So that's a comment that I had. And then just one other observation when you're talking about the Buck Jones and Jones Franklin station. Having been just a member of the public at a lot of the TOD remapping meetings, there seems to have been a lot of community conversation around that area of the corridor.
Yes.
And so I think we might just want to make sure that some of that station area planning focuses in on some of those community conversations.
On your last piece there, I would just say we agree 100%. Yeah, we're working that angle, and certainly want to make sure that everyone understands all of there's multiple, well, I guess they are projects, but there's many things happening within the corridor. They're all related, but they're all just a little bit different because of the regulatory processes that drive them. So we certainly want to communicate with those communities very closely to help them understand the process, timelines, and make sure that there is no confusion. And there just seems to be a general confusion right now with some, so we're going to be working on that. But point well taken. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions regarding the BRT update? Okay. We are at 4 o'clock. Has there been any community questions, public input?
To date, we have not had any signups,
Okay.
and no one is here. So,
Okay. All right. Well, then we will continue moving on to the equity fund.
all right. So I did a check-in with the board and the committees last week just to talk about the equity fund. And from each committee, I received confirmation that yes, we would like to move forward with a letter, letting council know that the equity fund and for lack of a better term, we're just saying equity fund, but whatever fund that may or however that may be developed by name is an important element. Really, it's funding to support catalytic projects, not just transit projects, but major capital projects that can impact communities, and not always in a positive way. It can raise tax values, which may stress individuals on fixed incomes, and and things of that nature. So I was very ambitious and said that we would have a draft of that today. This week has been a little bit busier than I anticipated. We do not have that draft for you today, but we will not wait for a committee meeting or for the next board meeting to get that to you. I'll be working with Andrea to draft that up next week and get that to you. I think we're also had talked about the fare free during those discussions as well, and that memo is kind of in the same bucket. I think that memo, though, will be easier for us to articulate the board's general consensus on that issue. So we'll be putting that out as well at the same time for comment to the full board. Unless there's some subcommittee that the board would like to delegate to editing those documents, we do plan to send it to the full body for comments, and then we'll make sure that we give you certainly 3-4 days at least to provide comments before we send back a final draft.
Mr. Chair, what is our position on fare free that we're communicating to council? I'm not.
I don't think that we have chosen one. I think there's been a lot of discussion, and I think everyone on here probably has their own personal opinions on it, but I don't think we've fully discussed a board
So I thought you
position.
were referencing that we were going to be sending a letter about fare free. I mean, I know we're going about the equity fund, and maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, I know that we had discussed that at some committee levels, and certainly if we want to revamp that for committees next month, that's what I would recommend. So we'll discuss that in committees next month, and certainly something that you can think about as we move into budget season in May.
Mr. Chair, at the Finance and Policy Committee meeting last week, we discussed the fare free, and we voted and agreed that we would report that out today and propose that we send a letter to council.
Got it. Okay.
That we support keeping the fare free position.
Okay. When we get to committee reports, I'd like to know a little bit
Thank you.
more. In
That'd be
fact,
great.
actually, why don't, because marketing went first last meeting, why doesn't finance and policy go first on this one when we get to committee reports? Just to make it nice and equal. Yes, please.
I just had one question. We're in the middle of budget presentations right now, and I saw it was on action items, so we can talk about it in committee discussion. But when do you anticipate presenting the transit budget to council?
So the transit budget has been presented to council as part of the overall city budget, so we won't do an independent presentation. They do have all of our needs, as well as our Wake Transit projected funding for 23. Again, this would be, so we're fare-free through FY23 in the existing proposed budget for council for FY23.
So for another year.
That's correct. So we know that we're fare-free, and we are, at least, let me look at my, Mr. Walker here. I think other triangle systems have stated basically the same thing as us, is that their boards are reviewing budgets which include fare-free proposals through FY23. We don't know anything until final votes are taken, but that's where each body is. So again, if the board were to make a decision on how it would like to put, whether it wants to make a statement on that after FY23, if it wants to take more time in FY23 to think about that would certainly be appropriate as well. Just as a general FYI, we will be developing information regarding options and impacts of what a no fare system would require. I would say as early as late summer. As soon as we get into FY23, we would start looking at that for FY24. So you may want to make sure that we can certainly bring that information to this body, and we'll also be bringing that information to council so that we can, make a good decision on that long term. So I'd probably, I know that that's a lot to think about, but just letting you know that there is more information coming. Those types of things are always, you have a finite amount of funding, no matter the pot sometimes, gets bigger, but it's still, you have a limit of that against how much service you can provide. And that's really what will have to happen. You either have to have new revenues or you use existing revenues. And under each scenario, there's always a trade-off. If you use new revenues, then those new revenues may not be able to go to something else. If you use existing revenues, then we have to determine what doesn't get funded in order to fund that delta. So.
I appreciate that. And sorry, my motivation for asking my question was really to just make sure that our memos stay ahead of council voting on the budget, so that they hear our opinion before they get there. So I just want to make sure that we have that in mind.
Yeah, and when we start talking, because I know if we're discussing by summer with council what that would look like in those trade-offs, it would be helpful for the committees and the board to have input before we present to council.
No, sounds good.
So
Good news is we have FY23 to figure that out. It's not July 1 of 22.
Well, David and Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we plan on a presentation from staff about the trade-offs of, is this something we could actually continue doing? Is it fiscally responsible? Is it something we need to do? And we would definitely like to have that conversation before and to make a recommendation to the city council. So at the appropriate time later this calendar year.
Well, and I think that conversation ideally starts in finance and policy and then goes to the full board.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Do you guys feel, because Joshua is not available here, do you guys feel that is an okay thing for you guys to take on?
Absolutely, and since Joshua isn't here, I had agreed to just report out that we were, what we voted on and wanted to report out to you today is a memo to council saying that we support Fare Free for FY '23. So we weren't
Okay.
trying to jump ahead of the next fiscal year. What we were trying to do was let our wishes be known as they are voting on the current or the FY '23 budget.
Okay, cool. Great. All right.
And just to clarify, so we already have that in the proposed budget already, though.
That is
So the
correct.
letter would just be supporting and from RTA that we are in support of. Okay.
Correct.
And thank you so much for that clarification. I did not say that, and that's, you know,
Yeah, that,
I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
yeah, I didn't know when to clarify that, but yes, we're not trying to jump ahead of where we are as
That's
a
correct.
committee or the authority or the council.
Wonderful.
So,
All right. Thank you. Any more conversation on this piece? Okay. Then let's move on to the RTA annual work plan.
Yes, so before you, you have the priority initiatives that were developed during the work plan that we did right before the holidays in '21. Traditionally, or I would say a few years back, before Wake Transit became the primary work plan for us, the Transit Authority always did develop a work plan with some initiatives. But during those days, there wasn't a lot of new revenue to provide new services. So generally, that's when the shelter program became very, top priority. Bus stop signage and some other things that did that first round of bus shelters and bus stop signage type of projects. Actually, one of the priorities of the board was CNG buses. So, that was probably back in 13 or 14, at least that long ago, that the board stated we would really like to have at least 75% of our fleet be CNG and the other 25% be some other advanced technology as we move forward. And so we're working towards that goal currently. We have 28 new CNG buses that are arriving as we speak. Very nice new vehicles that'll be hitting the road. We've asked for funding for more electric vehicles. So we are looking at increasing our electric fleet from 5. We'll be able to charge 14, we hope, by the end of the summer with new charging infrastructure. Isn't that correct, Mr. Walker, 14? Yeah, so we'll have 14 available slots for, for all electric. So we are looking at, certainly cleaning up the fleet and continuing that process. That's just giving you examples of initiatives that are out there beyond the Wake Transit plan itself. So these are the priority initiatives. And these are things that we put into the category of the board could direct staff to implement more directly. We could certainly take these on as projects throughout the year. And next slide, Andrea. Some indirect influences you thought were important are here as well. And so certainly as a transit staff, we may not be able to implement these directly ourselves, but we can still make these priorities by bringing in appropriate departments or speakers or other elements, and even the board can facilitate some of that interaction as well. We can have joint meetings, things of that nature. So again, these are the two primary areas that were discussed during the retreat. Again, I'm not proposing that we sit here today and try to determine this, but would like for us to have a work plan along with the Wake Transit work plan component, something to present to council in the first of FY23. So, we're looking at, maybe the first quarter, July, August, or September, saying, this is what we did in 22. This is where we're headed in 23, and these are our major initiatives that we'd like to take on. Again, just wanted to get people thinking about that. And if we need to take some extra time, staff will be happy to facilitate that. We can do that at a set-aside transit authority meeting at a regular time with a limited agenda, or we can meet at a completely different time in an evening or a morning, whatever's convenient for the board. We'll be here and available. So again, just trying to reach or develop that process, and certainly looking for any feedback from the board on how you would like to proceed.
Jen? I'm sorry?
I don't have to go first.
Is there someone, I'm sorry, LaPonna?
I just, as a comment, because I know we talked about developing the work plan and being able to present that to council for 2023. Looking at some of these initiatives that we have outlined here, I mean, not that they're low-hanging fruit, but there are some that I think we can take action on even this year. And so I wonder if we might have some discussion around what that could look like for some of these areas that, we can go ahead and get started on or even make some movement on for this year. I know that there's a couple of these there's not a burning platform for, and these are bigger conversations that, will take much more than RTA to take on, especially around affordable housing and land use planning, some of the indirect influences. But a couple of these, I wonder if there's some work that we could do within this space in the immediate.
The short answer is yes. Obviously, we'll be staffing hopefully back up over the next 60 days or so, but certainly if we know what the priorities are, we were hoping that we could, so there's a couple of ways to do that. You can just take the existing priority list as it's ranked now and just reconfirm that those are our priorities in order, and staff can get busy and we'll start prioritizing which ones we think that we can get done first. If there's 3 or 4 that you really just want to pull out and say, that's really what we want to work on this year and that's what we want to do, really concentrate on the most, we're welcome to that as well. So again, just looking for an approach from the board, and we're certainly open either way. But I do agree that some of these, we can get started on right away. And I would dare say that some of these we probably have some things already, if not in motion, at least outlined that we could hit the ground running with.
Jen, did you have, I'm sorry, did I?
Oh, that was it. I think
I think we're on the same wavelength, because I was going to ask really similarly. I personally would have a hard time removing anything from that priority list. I feel like we did a lot of that, I don't know what you call it, refining during the retreat. But I don't know what we have the staff capacity to accomplish in what time frame.
Yeah.
And so in order to really make a suggestion of what's actionable, I feel like I personally would need a little bit more information about what we have capacity to do and what the timeline might look like. And I'm not saying like a detailed task list, but just some idea of, like, I think one of the things that came up, just remembering, is like that we still have old cat bus branded signs on a lot of our stops. So that's a small thing, seemingly, but I imagine it's a lot of staff hours and money to actually take care of changing every single sign on every single stop. So having some of that started would help us, I think, in helping you make that work plan.
Speaking of low-hanging fruit, I think Mr. Walker had a quick little comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
Yes, David Walker, City of Raleigh. Passenger information, or not passenger information, bus stop signs. We have an RFP prepared, and likely we'll be posting that before the end of, sometime before June, to do just that. Go out and replace all of our existing cat
That's
bus
awesome.
signs with the Go Raleigh signs. We've been working with our signage department. They're within the transportation department, and they're going to be printing those signs up for us, and then we'll hire basically the labor to just go out and do the installations. It will be about a 6-month process to get them all switched out, but we do have plans for that, and that is moving forward.
I think we should award the contract to whomever uses the actual system to do that.
Is that money coming out of the current fiscal year or plans for the next fiscal year?
The correct answer is this fiscal year.
We've got
I'm
money
just
for it. So we've communicated with our finance team, and they have an account that they've told us we can pull money from. I can't speak to exactly where it's coming from, but we do have it programmed.
Well, thank you for, I'm really, really happy to hear that, and we heard about that in marketing, so I know it's something we've been wondering about. But to Jen's point, you know, of these priorities, I agree, I like all of them, but they all have money tied to them. And so, in terms of, I mean, that's where we could easily say, go do all this, but when do we have the money for it? I mean,
So next meeting, I don't want to put everybody on the spot here, but we will do our best by the next meeting to basically, what we can do is we can say from an implementable, high, medium, or low, how confident are that you can complete this in FY23. We'll do a high, medium, low ranking. We'll also basically rank it by fundability. Are there funds available, or are there funds that we can seek in order to accomplish that project? And we can also rank that on basically a high, medium, low as well. So we'll just develop that little matrix. We'll bring that back at the next committee meeting. We'll leave the initiatives, great feedback today that you like the prioritization that you did during your retreat. You don't want to change that. Just move forward with it as is. So that's good. So we've got, that gives it right there. We've got priority. We've got, can it be funded, and how, and then that next step.
I mean, since we haven't seen your budget proposal to the city council for FY23, I don't know if any of these things you've already included in the budget, and maybe you have.
Yeah, I would
recommend your proposal, I mean. So that would be, and you don't have to tell me right now, or tell us, but that would be helpful to know.
Yeah, we can, certainly that'd be our intent, is if it's a high, fundable project in 23, that means it's in the budget. If it's a medium or low, then we'll explain that, we're going to have to look for some discretionary funds.
Is there any possibility, go ahead, before because we're having this discussion, but I think there's a lot of interest in some of this, and I wonder whether it makes sense because staff is strapped. I think the priority of funding, looking at implementation ability is a good help to that, but I also wonder whether it makes sense to build, and because this is such a large priority for this board, whether it makes sense to build an ad hoc committee to really just work on this and then report back to the board on this is what we've gotten, this is what we recommend we move forward with, this is how we recommend we move forward, we've worked with staff, we have an idea, and this is how it's going to go, so that when we do build that work plan with city council, that it's got some dedication versus us doing this, broken into 4 ways between 3 committees and 1 board. What do you all think? And I may be off on that, so.
I would say, I think my initial reaction to that is, I think it's a great idea. I would say it would be helpful probably as a first step to have that type of a matrix, just so that we know, what staff capacity is and kind of what ranks to the top. But I do think that having a dedicated group of folks have the energy and time to be able to do that, just to be able to help support staff and make sure that we're making some forward movement is valuable to have. And then some of these efforts, I mean, there are dollars attached to several of these, but when you're talking about like better communication, regional coordination, I mean, those are low cost, no cost things that we can just really be more intentional about. And so those are, a couple things I think we can do in the short term, even while trying to work through what the capacities may be for staff.
Absolutely. Ms. Williams?
So looking at some of the influence, going back to the first page, if you can go back 1, some of this stuff can be consolidated. So like the second one where it says route and system, then it also talks about increase north and south connectivity. That's kind of the same thing. So I think whoever works on that can be combined. So looking at some of those priorities, like, hey, can we bunch this together? Can this be grouped together? So kind of minimalize some of those key points. I think that can be done at one time. And just like you said, I kind of agree with that, kind of pinpoint some of those items and consolidate. Like some of those things like communication, that shouldn't be cost. That's things that we should be doing, but we should just be doing it more effectively. And then David, I had a question about the signs that's going up. Can we see the signs? Like, what is going to be put on the signs? Like, what's changing? Is it just Go Raleigh, or is something what's up there today, like the text number and the logo? Like,
We can certainly send out an example of what those signs look like. There are some signs already out there on the street. For instance, I believe number one Capitol, all of those signs have been replaced. Number 18, number 19, 27. Most of the new services that have gone into service since 2019, they all have the new signage. We've only got about 1,000 out of 1,400 signs that are left to be changed out.
right. And reason I ask that, because if the signage talks about, one of the points here, talking about destination, direction, where it's going, like what's on the sign, maybe something on the signs today, which we know today doesn't have enough information. So before we go put up all these signs, let's, make sure that the signs you're putting up in 6 months actually has information that talks about Go Raleigh, that actually has enough information for the riders. So like some of the stuff we're talking about there, the initiatives, we can consolidate and kind of make sure we're in a straight plan that makes less time or wasting time or money doing duplicate efforts. So like when we talk about putting up routes and signs at the stops, we probably can do the same thing as we put up the sign. So the guy can put up the sign and put up the schedules at the bus stops. So that's probably some things, I know it's probably already in the works, but some things we can think about minimizing man work.
Yeah, all of the signs do have the final destination. So if it's coming inbound towards downtown, it says downtown.
Okay.
If it's going outbound, typically what you put on the sign is the final cross street. Like for the number 2, it would say 2 Strickland Road, or 2 Pleasant Valley Shopping Center for the number 6 going out Glenwood. So that's the typical language that we have today. If you feel like that should be tweaked some, we're certainly glad to talk about that. I think Route Committee would be the appropriate committee to send that to if we wanted to have that conversation.
That sounds great. That would be awesome. Can we add that and discuss that if you can join us at that meeting? Okay. It's always nice when you suggest something and it gets added to your own.
Following up on David's question about how should we proceed with our priority list and making assessments, I was just having a side conversation with Nathan, and one idea I'm going to throw out is maybe the committee chairs get together, since these priorities are sort of cross-cutting, and meet with staff. If we could just have a meeting, I don't know if it needs to be an ad hoc committee, or not that, or if anybody from the board who wants to participate. That's one idea I'm going to throw out, unless we want to just do it at the next full board meeting. I don't know what other action items we have that for the next board meeting, because we don't have any action items this meeting. It's all just stuff that we've already talked about in all of our committees, and I think this is really important, setting our priorities.
I think
So I'm
that makes a lot of
proposing
sense.
different ideas.
I think what a good place to start, I think, as LaPonda actually pointed out, like getting that matrix first. Let's get that from staff, and then I think meeting the chairs, because chairs need to set the next steps anyway for agendas moving forward and what we're going to do in FY23 for each committee. So maybe that feeds into that, and then we open that up to a larger sort of discussion and get that going. Does that work with everyone?
Just to clarify what you were saying, we're asking for staff to present to us that matrix that we've just been talking about at the next meeting, and then propose that the committee chairs get together with staff immediately after that. I agree.
Yeah, and work out, because my concern about doing it in a full board meeting is A, taking up that time, but B, I think part of what this needs is a conversation offline, sort of trying to figure out who's doing what, where, what is being done, and what we need to look at over the next year, and I don't want to have staff sitting there waiting for us to get it done while we're sort of tossing that around and maybe not talking about BRT decisions or something like that.
And also waiting, because after we get the matrix, we should be able to move on some of it, to start wheels turning, as it were, so that we're not all in a hold, especially staff, in a hold pattern until the June meeting. So, yes.
So,
Yeah.
on that note, I was actually going to suggest, I think it would be worth having a special meeting that's just about the work plan. Also, so that we can take public comment just about the work plan. When Bicycle Pedestrian Committee does their work plan, when Parks does their work plan, there are people that come and say what they think is important. I think if we're going to have that engagement on our list of initiatives, and I've been looking at it for the last 10 or 15 minutes, like, we all have ideas of what should be done next year, and staff has great insight on what can be done next year, but to make those decisions, especially quickly over the next couple months, to be prepared for hitting the year 23 running, I think we've got to have a special meeting that's announced and invite the public to make comment on it.
I absolutely agree. I think that happens after we figure out some of that stuff. Maybe when the matrix is put together, even before, if it's before the next board meeting, there can be a priority to get chairs together just to talk about it. We can figure some of that out and then present some of it at May, and then set a schedule for because you're absolutely right. We do need to do this publicly. We need to do it with input from the public, because they are the ones who are the ones that are going to use this the most. So absolutely.
Well, then would it make sense, though, for us to have the public discussion at one of our regular meetings when the public might be expecting to come and provide public input, rather than a special meeting that they might not know about? I mean, since my concern is if we have a special meeting, how are people going to know about it? It's got to be publicized, whereas this is a regular meeting that's always on the calendar, and it's always open for public comment.
And I might just add that we said we may not have, we don't have other actionable items. We're looking at the May meeting being these priorities, perhaps, May and then June. So maybe we could just have that be discussed at our regular meeting.
My only concern is I don't know what the May, if there are going to be action items in May, so I don't want to.
You guys have an idea on what
necessarily.
agendas in May and June might be looking like at this point?
You have anything major?
Not that I can think of.
We're coming off packed agendas for the last few months, so we're just used to them being full.
And this may be a, I don't know, a silly question, but could we not just, or a proposal, but could we not have a special meeting and then also provide an opportunity for folks at a regular meeting to still provide comment?
We absolutely
Like, do we just
can.
have to get it
Yep.
at one point in time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or potentially do a survey out to the public? Kind of, we put the rankings and they can choose like which one is a priority and just kind of get their feedback.
Yeah, we absolutely can do both of those things, and I, especially if we can use some of the resources not from transportation to put a survey together, that would be even better, because then that won't pull their staff time. But I know that most of the city uses different survey tools, so it shouldn't be that difficult. Andrea, I'm looking at you because I know that you're probably going to end up doing most of that. So,
Thank you.
Yes, we can do that.
okay.
Well, what's confusing about this is we have to remember this is a work plan. I thought at the retreat this was a work plan for the coming years, not necessarily just for this fiscal year, which is also different than the priorities of the Wake Transit Plan that we're constantly having public input on, and they're resetting those priorities in its budget, the Wake Transit Plan budget, every year. And that's all just to say it's confusing. And I mean, I get confused, and I think, so I just want to, I mean, I get confused, and I think, so I just want to, are these priorities, are we setting for Go Raleigh for X number of years, or just for Go Raleigh and the city for FY '23? But again, like increased frequency and off-hour service, number one priority, that's the major priority of the Wake Transit Plan, or one of the top priorities of the Wake Transit Plan that we are a part of. And it is already happening because of the Wake Transit Plan, which is separate, that we're just a part of. This is,
Yeah, so I would characterize, the priority initiatives from the retreat, again, as FY '23 priorities for the board. Many priorities take more than 1 year, but you have to start them. So, priorities for FY '23 that can get started that fiscal year, and certainly if they roll into to subsequent fiscal years, that happens. But that we can, put in our work plans as staff to in many ways implement directly, or lots of times many of these items are just opportunity items. So you have something in your work plan you've been working on, you can't think about how to implement it, and all of a sudden this great opportunity comes available and you're like, wow, look at that, we've got this sitting here and it just fits this perfect. So that's what we're looking for. Again, we'll proceed however you like, but it looks like seems like from earlier comments you like the priority. We're just going to give you capacity, financial commitment, things of that nature, information, and move forward.
Yeah. And just a point of clarity, it doesn't have to just be Wake Transit pieces. We can pull in, because I know Wake Transit programming is.
well, I know that, I'm just
Yeah,
saying there's
so.
different components.
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
this
so we-
And I think of this as
priority.
I think
beyond that.
that's why we need to have this conversation,
Yeah.
because I think that we may come to the table with different
But we haven't yet
ideas of
figured
that.
out a process of how we're gonna have the conversation and have the
So
community
what we're gonna
input
do
and the public
is,
input.
staff is going to
meetings.
get the matrix to the board. When that's available, you, me, Joshua, and our chair will set up a call between the four of us. We will discuss these and try to come up with something of something to present at May
At the May meeting.
meeting, in
then-
that way.
But then if we're gonna have public input, would that need to be at the June meeting?
Well, that
And-
gives us time to do that.
And doesn't the city council vote on the budget in June?
Potentially.
So if we're gonna make any changes, I don't even know if it's too late for FY '23.
I don't know that we have any time to make changes because we haven't seen anything from it, so.
But so again, I mean, certainly your budget is important, but opportunities do arise throughout the year for us to implement priorities if we know what those priorities are and how they're prioritized. Yeah.
The city finding $20 in their back pocket sort of thing.
Well, I mean, it is the season of discretionary grants.
That is true.
Certainly, we want to make sure that we leverage those whenever possible, and if there's a way that we can work these initiatives into existing priorities and funding pools, then we want to be able to do that as well. I think we've been fairly successful at doing that historically, and we want that to continue.
Okay, all right. Everyone comfortable with that move forward?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's move on. Sorry, Andrea, I'm going to make you jump around. We are going to start with finance and policy. Go ahead.
Okay. The Finance and Policy Committee met last week, and basically we heard presentations from staff about service equity, especially on Hillsborough Street. The, and we approved the analysis that was, we approved the analysis and therefore wanted to report that out today as an action item that the full board can vote on, and that is it's the service equity, and help me if I'm wrong here, David, but the service equity analysis was pretty much a routine staff-driven analysis that has to be done.
Right. Anytime you do a service change that's considered a major service change, a service equity analysis is required. There are typically two items that you focus in on, and that is the proportion of low-income riders and the proportion of, gosh, I'm doing this off the top of my head, the disproportionate impact to minorities.
Right.
Right, so minorities and low income. The Hillsborough Street Service will serve a smaller percentage of minority than the rest of the system, and I believe the numbers were 30% along the Hillsborough corridor versus about 45% for the entire system. But this is new service, so there's not a disproportionate impact. They're actually going to be, all persons along the corridor will receive better service. So because of that, it wasn't deemed a disproportionate impact because we're actually increasing the service. On the low income percentage along the corridor, I believe, was about 25%, and system-wide it was in the 30s. So we're actually serving a better population, a better number statistically of low-income riders along the corridor. So there were no disparate impacts to either minorities or the low-income ridership. The document was discussed at the January and February Finance and Policy Committee meeting. It was on the docket to be discussed in both February and March at the full board meeting, and due to the length of those meetings, we weren't able to get a full report out by the committee chairs. So the committee last week did take action and pass that to bring that to the full board for consideration today, and that document is attached to the board docs.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh, sure.
Just to refresh my memory, looking at the notes, this is an all-new route, the full length of Hillsborough from Blue Ridge to downtown, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
It will be implemented in 2 phases due to some of the construction projects David was talking about earlier. The first 1.5 to 2 years, it will actually turn short of Interstate 440 and then come straight back in on Hillsborough. And once those some of those projects get opened up, then it will go all the way out to that Buck Jones Western interchange.
Thanks.
And I mean, we did discuss in our committee the fact that most of the riders impacted in that particular part of Hillsborough Street are students at Meredith College and NC State, and also the low-income housing areas that are on that far end of Hillsborough Street. So, as David said, it's kind of a wash not a wash, but overall, in terms of the service equity, it doesn't change, which is why we voted to approve it, and we want to ask for the full board to vote on approving this service equity analysis.
Okay, so the recommendation is to approve the service equity analysis for Hillsborough.
Yes.
I'll ask to make a motion, and then we can open up for discussion if folks want. So do we have someone to make a motion?
Can I just ask a question before we do that? Just
Yeah.
because just to be clear. So the equity analysis has already been completed and these are the results, and we're being asked to approve the results as is?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to make sure. I thought there was something more that we needed to do there.
No, in fact, it was on our agenda for the past 2 full board meetings. We just ran out of time to go over it. So it's been, the information has been in our
Docket for a while.
hands for a while.
Anytime you're doing the major service change, you have to do the service equity analysis. Once that's complete, it has to go to the board for endorsement or approval, and then that just goes into our file for when we get audited by FTA every 3 years.
And just one other question too, since this is a new route and just for background purposes. So we decided to do the equity analysis for this new route in this particular area versus other areas because of what was the motivation behind it?
It's a federal requirement.
Okay.
Yeah, you study the corridor that you're making changes to. So typically, if you're making an improvement to services, it's it's always going to be a good thing. If, for instance, you were taking service away, then that's when you can start having those negative impacts to minorities and low-income riders, and you really have to study that hard. And if there are disparate impacts to those two groups, or either of those two groups, then you have to mitigate to show what you're going to do to help support that.
Okay.
Are you asking why we did the study or why we put the route here?
Right. I guess I'm more asking that question, more of like, was there another route that we could have taken that could have gotten us to, I don't know, numbers that are closer to a higher minority concentration that's consistent with the Go Raleigh system and as well as low income?
So all of the services that we're bringing forward are part of the Wake Transit Plan. They have gone through extensive vetting and public engagement and prioritizing, throughout the whole process of development of the Wake Transit Plan. So that was done during that development of the Wake Transit Plan.
Okay.
And every single implementation can't hit every single specific demographic at the levels that in theory you would want, but you're going to have some that may be, this one for instance serves one of those demographics at a higher level, one is at a lower level. So you're always going to have some fluctuation.
Your question is well taken, though. I mean, it's been in the Wake Transit Plan, but the Wake Transit Plan is edging on 8 years old. Right. So there have been changes, but and probably it makes sense as we start to look towards new routes coming up through the Wake Transit Plan, just continue looking at that. But this one was new service that I think was highly anticipated. It was supposed to come in 22.
It actually was scheduled a couple of years ago, and we brought the Glenwood route package first because of all these changes we're still having problems with today.
So this is backlog.
So Hillsborough came in, we brought that forward next.
Well, I think there's helpful context too, especially to your point about this being 8 years old, because I mean, as we all know, the demographics in these communities are rapidly changing. And so it's great to be able to do an equity analysis to make sure that we're not exasperating the conditions of those who are most needed. But it's a good point that we're doing this type of analysis, but important to also just keep in mind the factors that we just laid out around making sure that it's going to be equitable for everyone. So, okay.
And my apologies for not presenting it in that way. I didn't, the fact that it has been an approved route for a really long time, I should have reminded everyone.
That's good.
And to your point, we are in the middle of a new bus plan update. So we are extensively going through route by route, looking at those, previously planned services to see if tweaks can be made to improve them. And then once that overall look is made, then they'll go through that prioritization process, looking at all the demographics to sort of reprogram. So that's an ongoing process right now. I think public engagement is going to be starting sometime in the next 30 days or so. So be on the lookout for emails with information about that engagement.
And is that just for the Go Raleigh routes, or is that part of the
That's
Wake Transit
system-wide.
plan?
That's all of the agencies. Raleigh, Durham, Cary, or
So
not,
if it's part of Wake
actually
Transit.
Durham is participating. It's not part of the Wake Transit funding, but they are participating, updating their plan as well.
Okay.
If it's in order, would like to make the motion, then I have a couple of follow-up questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would move to approve the equity analysis for the route as presented.
Go ahead with your, do you have follow-up questions?
No, I'll second her motion.
Okay.
I would like to see back in route committee some of the overlaps between the 12 and the 11 and the new 9. I think they hit on some of the points that we've been talking in route a few times. So enhanced transfer point potentials. I'd like to see that back in route at some point.
We can do that. We have had that conversation
Lot of
extensively
overlap
with our
here.
consultants that's going through this new bus plan update. Is, you know, what does all this look like out here in the western part of the area?
Okay. Are there other questions, conversation, discussion on this analysis?
I just want to clarify for myself, this analysis is it's a formality. It's something you do every time there's new service. Is that right?
If there's a service change that's considered a major service,
Okay.
and I can't quote the exact
25% of route
yeah.
miles or hours,
Right.
yes, route miles or hours.
So theoretically, this is something that we frequently are going to,
Right. We bring these regularly.
okay.
Okay. If there's no more questions or discussion, we can take a vote. If you want to show by the yeses by hand, we can start with that. All the ayes?
Aye.
Okay. Records show that that is unanimous, so that passes, and we will move on to the fare equity analysis.
Okay, thank you. The fare equity analysis is something that's also required by the Federal Transit Authority, and this one I see as extremely pro forma because over the last fiscal year, we've been fare-free because of the pandemic, and then we are currently fare-free, and the analysis basically was saying that it's kind of hard to imagine that going from free to free is going to have any kind of impact on low-income or minority ridership. So essentially, this is just filling in the blanks of, yes, we have seen that there was no impact from free fare.
Right. It's a very similar analysis to the service equity analysis we're studying, and we're not studying free to free. We're actually studying the step down to free from when we were collecting a fare. FTA gave everyone a grace period of X number of months before having to do an equity analysis, and since we know we're going to be beyond that grace period, we had to go ahead and get this analysis complete to go from collecting fares to zero fare. If at some point in the future it's determined that we restart fares, then we would have to do this same analysis to return to that fare collection. But this one today is for the reduction of fares down to the suspension of fares.
And if I could, real quick, and the reason FTA wanted every agency that went to free fares to perform this is that some agencies said that base fares are now free, but commuter fares stay. That may or may not be a good idea. Some agencies even went as far as to say fixed route service is free, but paratransit service or service for persons with disabilities is not free, which obviously is causes a problem, to say the least. But those things were happening nationally with some agencies. So FTA said, look, everybody needs to look, if you're going fare free, everybody needs to look at all your fare categories and make sure that everything is equitable. With that said, Raleigh went fare free across all fare categories, as well as paratransit, as well as the entire triangle did. So, we didn't have a big problem or an issue like some agencies did thinking about how that might work. But anyway, I just want to provide some context because a lot of people were like, why would you actually do a equity? Why would you do an analysis on going from a fare to zero fare? But that's because some people still kept a fare in certain categories.
All right, so if someone wants to make a motion second for the fare equity, and then we can look at we can discuss if we need it. All right, so is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, any discussion on the fare equity?
I'll just add, when we talked about this en route, one of the things that came up was being really conscious of what this equity analysis might look like if it went the other way around. Because what we're going to be talking about in FY23 to figure out is if we bring fares back, and looking at this analysis, and obviously it's no potential for a negative disparate impact, but I think you could sort of say the opposite. It's been a positive impact, and so we really need to think carefully about what running this analysis the other way would look like, and that came up in our discussion.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. So we will take a vote. We'll show by the ayes by hand. All those in favor? All right. That passes unanimously.
Thank
Linda,
you.
you can go on to the next item.
Okay, so the next item is the FY23 proposed budget. And
We do have Ms. Siobhan Tucker here. She'll be happy to provide any level of detail that the board would like to go into. She can run through the presentation that she provided in committee. I think it's only about 4 or 5 slides, Siobhan, if I'm correct.
Siobhan Tucker, City of Raleigh, Transportation Transit, yes, Senior Fiscal Analyst. The slides is a high-level summary of the materials that are in board docs. In board docs, you do have a detailed breakout of both the City of Raleigh proposed FY23 budget and also the weight transit plan. So the slides are kind of walking you through just a high level how everything fits together. So we can do this. We can run through the slides if you'd prefer that.
would you, thank you.
So a couple of things to note as we walk through the materials. For the FY23 budget, the time period that we are referring to is July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. That is the FY23 budget. And also, one thing that is required as transit staff and work with the budget office to create the budget is that it is required to be balanced, meaning that for every dollar of expenditures, a dollar of revenue has to be identified as well. So that kind of goes back to the discussions that you all have been having about fare free. Working through that exercise of if fare revenues are removed from the budget, how do you then rebalance the budget? So that is one key thing that we always want to keep in mind. And also, transit does submit proposed budgets for both the City of Raleigh and the weight transit plan. So basically, every fiscal year, we are preparing 2 budgets. This is a timeline of the City of Raleigh's FY23 budget process. We submitted our proposed budgets in February. In February. And so May 17th, the city manager does propose the FY23 budget to City Council. So in between that submission time and this May date, basically we're working through the approval steps within the city. So at the department level, we have priorities, and also working with the budget department, the finance department, and also the city manager's office. Right now, we're having those discussions to make sure that the budget that transit submits fits with the rest of the city's budget as well. June 7th is the budget public hearing. June, we have the city council budget work sessions with the goal of having a adopted budget by June 30th, approved by city council. So in your agenda packet, you will see detailed budgets for our 5 operating budgets, our 5 major program areas, and that's transit. And that's just the day-to-day operation of the fixed route system. That includes operating expenses and personnel expenses. Also paratransit, our ADA transit system, our planning that covers staff salaries for multiple positions, and also our actual planning functions. The TDM program, Transportation Demand Management, and also the Weight Transit Plan. A couple of things to note about the City of Raleigh's budget for FY23. We were fortunate in that the general fund contributions are consistent with prior years. One thing that is a little different when you look at the detailed materials is that it appears that the general fund contribution is decreasing. However, that's because for FY23, we are tapping into the relief funding that we received in relation to the COVID impact. So we did receive CARES funding, American Rescue funding, and CRISA. So for FY23, we are going to be using some of that funding to help support fixed route operations and paratransit. The great thing about that funding is that there is no local match. It's all 100% federal. And so the general fund match, or the general fund funding that we would have normally used to match that federal funding, we're going to be able to reserve some of that funding for future grant uses to match some of the competitive and discretionary grants that we're looking at for FY23. So just wanted to point that out, that the city's support of transit is still consistent as far as general fund dollars. Also, the draft budget assumes that we're going to see some increases next year for both fixed route and paratransit contractual service expenses, primarily related to the vendor contract RFP process that we will be going through very shortly. One thing that David has talked about on multiple occasions with the board is that with this new structure, the understanding going in is that we do expect to see some increase in cost. So for the budget for FY23, we are being careful and intentional about building in some capacity for those expenses so that we don't run into any surprises when we actually negotiate that contract. And I think I skipped over the second bullet. The draft budget, as mentioned before in today's meeting, does assume that fixed route and paratransit fare box collections will remain suspended in FY23. And of course, that is pending City Council approval in June. The screenshots that we have here on this slide and going through the next couple of slides are coming directly from the materials in your packet. And what you'll see is a breakout between revenues and expenditures for each of the programs. And as I mentioned, each of the budgets is balanced. So you'll see that revenues does equal expenditures for each of the programs as we go through. For the fixed route program, we did build back in the state maintenance assistance program state funding that we had become accustomed to receiving each year. We did not receive it in 21, but we did receive it in 22. So we are building that $3 million back into the budget. Also, you'll see that Farebox has been kept at 0. Our federal grant funding is consistent. General fund is fairly consistent. I did mention that we do not need that match, which is why you do see a slight decrease here. And then we have the Wake Transit administrative and operational budgets that feed into our program area. And like I mentioned, the Wake Transit detail is a little further in the packet, I think on page 3 or 4. So you'll see that detailed breakout of what exactly makes up the Wake Transit admin versus operations. Same here with the Go Raleigh Access Program. You'll see that the budget structure is very similar. Farebox revenue, we do have programmed at 0 for 23, and also our federal grant funding. We do plan on, as I mentioned, using more of that relief funding in FY23, which meant that we do not need that match, meaning that general fund did go down, but as I mentioned, we are putting that funding aside in a reserve account. In the same Wake Transit Plan admin and operations, you will see those lines here as well for the Wake Transit specific funding that we receive for the paratransit program. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
I have a couple of questions about the budget. For the Wake Transit Plan Administration and Operations, that's what our projected costs are. And do I have that correct? And for the Wake Transit Plan budget, how much of that is coming from the county sales tax? Is that our source of revenue for the most part for those line items, or is that what the city is paying into them?
So for the Wake Transit Plan, that is funded primarily through the sales tax. So the amounts that you see here is 100% Wake Transit. This is no city funding included in these two, in the Wake Transit account lines. So for example, for Wake Transit Plan for administration for Go Raleigh Access, that is 100% Wake Transit funded.
And the and I'm looking at the fixed route because that's the bigger number. For the plan administration for Wake Transit Plan, that's our staff, I'm assuming, and operations is the actual running of the buses. Is that right?
Right. The administration includes Wake Transit currently funds 7 full-time transit positions. And then if you look in the packet, there are a couple of new positions that were requested for FY23. And operations is the actual bus service. Yes, that's correct.
So, and then thank you. And so my second question is for advertising, is that just for Go Raleigh, or is that Wake Transit Plan?
This is just Go Raleigh. So this is like the revenue for like the bus wraps.
But this is what, and maybe I'm looking at Andrea. So for our advertising, the 200,000 is what we're spending for advertising?
Just
Yes.
revenue.
That's revenue.
Oh, this is revenue.
This is what you see up here.
Yes,
Sorry. What you see up
yes.
here, there's revenues up top, and everything underneath that is part of the revenues.
Right, okay. So for the expenditure, we're not seeing that because it's in our packet and I couldn't find it. I was looking.
Right. So the advertising revenue, that's the revenue we expect to receive for the advertising, but the cost of the marketing program will be included in the contractual services below.
And can you tell me what that is for marketing and advertising that we're doing, both for?
Do have it on the board docs.
I couldn't find it.
It's not broken out.
Yeah.
Contractual services just is a $40 million line item. It's not broken to that level of detail.
I can provide that number for you, but in the past, historically, it's been around, I think, 100 to 150,000 is our typical marketing budget. And then for FY23 also, we requested 50,000 annually for marketing. So that will help supplement the marketing budget as well.
From the Wake Transit Plan.
From the Wake Transit Fund,
Right.
50,000.
And we discussed this in the marketing committee, that's last year, we'd had a $250,000 marketing budget for Wake Transit Plan, and now it's only $50,000. So that's a significant decrease.
The 200,000 for Wake Transit was a one-time fee, but we used it over a period of multiple years. So I think we requested that and received it in FY19, and this is the last year that we're spending on it. So that funding will be used this fiscal year. So for FY23, the marketing funding that we're receiving, the 50,000 that we requested, that will be an annual amount that we will receive from Wake Transit
That
each
was
year.
part of the 250 multi-year request.
Yeah,
And
the
Andrea's
250
saying
was
no, and
right. Yeah, the 250 was used over like a 3 to 4 year period, but the 50,000 we will receive 50,000 each year going forward, starting in FY23.
so but it's still a decrease from last year. If we had 250,000 over 3 years, how many years was that?
The 250,000 was awarded or allocated in FY19 from Wake Transit,
So
and
full-
we
yeah.
spent a portion of that.
I understand, but I'm just
Right.
per year.
Slightly over 50,000 per year.
Okay,
About 62.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Are we looking to potentially look for more revenue for advertising from outside? Because you said that's for the wrapping of the bus, but are we looking for other opportunities to increase the revenue? Because there's opportunities, but are we like accepting opportunities?
So, not too long ago, several years ago, the board did open up our entire fleet to advertising. They actually made two actions. We did away with wrap buses because you lose your identity when you wrap a vehicle.
Right.
And we went to basically panel advertising only, which means, curbside, street side, and the rear of the bus. So we have 100% of our fleet which is eligible to receive that advertising. So that all of that is open space, which is managed and allowed to be advertised on. Other opportunities that are out there, we're potentially looking at some technology opportunities which exist on our monitors inside the vehicles, where we provide general information, safety information, things of that nature. It doesn't have audio; it's really just a visual. People have seen the vehicle monitors. We have two generally placed within the bus. Some agencies do use those. We may do a pilot on those. We haven't quite nailed down what that would look like, and we want to make sure that we stay legal from a procurement standards process on that. But we probably need to test that market before we really dive into it, I guess is a good way to say it. So we'll be back in the future as we continue to have discussions on that with potential vendors that could help us with that type of technology. But right now, I guess the short answer is we're advertising on all sides, or both sides of the bus and the rear, and we're trying to book that up as much as we can.
I had a question.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You can go ahead. I'll wait.
Okay. This is also a similar timeline for the Wake Transit Plan FY23 process. February 14th, the work plan was released for a 30-day public comment. On March 29th, we did have a regional meeting between the subcommittees to discuss the public comments and also any changes to the work plan that will be presented to TPAC on the 20th. One thing that did come up, and we discussed it in committee, is that in the draft version, there was funding amounts included for Farebox, but for Wake Transit, the version that will be presented to TPAC on the April 20th has removed Farebox as well. So that proposed work plan does have Farebox at 0 as well, which is consistent with the draft work plans for the other area transit agencies as well. As I mentioned, the detail for the Wake Transit Plan budget is in your packet, but a couple of things just to point out that are different from FY22. One is that annual marketing budget that we were just talking about. Starting in FY23, there is an annual $50,000 allocation that Go Raleigh will receive to help fund Wake Transit related marketing efforts. So I know Andrea and her group are looking forward to that. Also, we requested 3 new staff positions. One, a fiscal analyst to focus on Wake Transit financial administration, an engineering and construction management staff position to help with some of these projects that we have coming down the pipeline, and also an FTE for real estate support. And for the new Route 9 Hillsborough Street, I think we talked about that earlier as well. And as far as capital request, we do still have the recurring funding that we have been receiving each year for bus shelter improvements for new and existing, also fixed route vehicle purchases. And as far as new request, $5.8 million for the expansion of the maintenance garage and administrative space at the Pool Road facility, and $2 million for land acquisition to relocate the Triangle Town Center Transit Center. And I think everything else, as far as the capital work plan, should be familiar to you.
Thank you very much. Before we get to approval, does anyone have questions on the budget?
I was actually going to ask about the Wake Transit Capital. It's about half the requested amount as last year. If I'm reading this correctly, it was like 55 last year and 26 this year. Is that because of all the buses that were bought last year? Like, which of those years is more normal?
Is this for the Wake Transit column?
Yes.
Section? Well, actually, one thing to point out, the prior year's amount is the cumulative amount of expenses or revenue we have received since the inception of the Wake Transit Plan. But as far as the vehicle, the change in the vehicle budget, I think I'm going to defer to either David Eatman or David Walker to maybe speak about that.
That's fine. Just knowing that it was prior years, multiple prior years.
Oh, that
answers the
helps.
question.
Okay.
We're moving into construction on the BRT and final design on 2 others. So it was surprising to me that the number was lower. So that explains it, that it's multi-year.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because that would be, the prior years would be FY18 to FY22. So that would explain that variance. Yeah.
And then I think this is a little bit piggybacking on where Karen was talking about the Go Raleigh expenditures. And this is just because I have the work plan conversation still in my head. It's hard to per se know how different things get prioritized within the operating and the contractual services line items. These are just really big line items, which they should be, but it's hard to know necessarily what the priority decisions we're making are. So when we come back with work plan, can we get sort of the breakout of those 2 expenditure line items of what the subcategories? Like the Wake Transit Plan gets a little bit more detailed in the information that's provided.
Sure, we can do that. And I'll coordinate with David to maybe talk about a format that would be most valuable for you guys, because I do want to make sure that whatever we give you actually, makes sense and gives you the information that you need. So, yeah, we can definitely do that. That should be an easy ask.
And just for clarity, contractual services under fixed route and paratransit, is that what you were requesting? And for Wake Transit, all 3?
The Wake Transit's really there. I mean,
Okay.
It talks about the new routes and everything. It just gets to a finer level of detail. So like Karen's marketing question, for example, would have been answered by kind of just having that operating budget.
Yep.
Like what goes to which priorities would, like there's a list here, right? Fixed route transportation, vehicle maintenance, fuel costs, like what
Just break
percentage are
those
each
out?
of those things.
Okay.
Like, just knowing, I know you have the list because you added them up to make this number happen. So getting a
Yes.
finer level.
Yeah,
of
we
detail.
can provide that.
So
yeah.
for contracted services, we have that in a couple of different budgets. So I was just making sure, we've got 5 different budgets. So I was just making sure which budgets you wanted that from. The fixed
For me,
route
it would be-
and,
I would think fixed route and access program in order
Okay.
to make our priority decisions
Excellent.
that we were talking about earlier.
all right.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair.
Any other questions? All right. I do have one quick question, Siobhan. In this budget, you said the general fund has a 2% increase, and I know that we're using some federal funding. Are we? I'm assuming you're taking inflation costs into account, but are there places where we have contingency in case A, inflation gets further, or B, there are cost increases that we weren't projecting in certain areas?
So we did a couple of things with the FY23 budget. One, for the general fund, the federal funding that we're using does not require that match. So we are able to keep some of that general fund amount in a reserve. So that is funding that we can tap into in FY23. Also, too, we do know that for the budget, anticipated increases are primarily probably going to come from that vendor contract, the RFP. So we have built in definitely some buffer for that because we don't know what it's going to be, but we have been able to come up with some reasonable assumptions that we built into the budget. And then also, one thing that I guess transit has been fortunate is that we did get the relief funding. A lot of other departments did not. So if it does come, if we do get into a situation where we do have significant increases in expenses that we were just not anticipating, we do have that funding that we can tap into that can kind of help supplement some of those expenses. So I think transit, we're in a pretty good position in that we have a couple of different sources that we can tap into if needed.
That was a great answer. Thank you.
But that's a point well taken. I mean, I think FY23 is going to be a transition year for all of transit. All of transit's going to experience inflation, a labor market that's challenging, and certainly in our case, we've got a brand new contract structure which we're going to be soliciting and implementing. So, yeah, it's going to be a transition year, and hopefully at the end of 23, we'll know what the new normal will be.
Just don't tell David Walker that he can make like 5 times what he's making on the private sector.
No.
He doesn't need to know that. Anyway, all right. Any other questions from the board on this before we vote?
I don't have a question necessarily on the 23 budget or fiscal year 23 budget, but I know that we'll have that conversation in the future, but I think it would be helpful to know both regionally, statewide, and even nationally, like what are going to be the impacts of COVID and not taking fares for this extended period of time, because the dollars have to come from somewhere. So I think as those conversations are happening or as you guys are hearing things, it'd be helpful to have those updates.
Yeah, we
I
can
second
definitely
that.
provide that, and we will have impacts on both the weight transit side and the city side. So we have started talking about creating those scenarios like during the summer so that we can get ahead of the budget development process. Because if we wait until then, it's really too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. All right. So does anyone want to put the budget on the, make a motion for the budget?
I thought we already had.
Did we? I don't remember. I don't have it
I
written
don't
down.
think,
so-
I don't think.
So,
Board.
why don't we do it
Yes,
now? Just
I'll
in
make a
case.
motion
Okay.
that we approve the budget.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All right. Let's show of hands for our ayes, and then if we need to, our nays. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Siobhan.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. We are going to move on to the next item you would like to bring up.
Okay. This was discussed a little bit earlier, or this next item came up earlier. When our Finance and Policy Committee met last week, we discussed the suspended fares for over the past year, and the fact that FY23 budget is assuming fare-free, is being presented as another year of fare-free. So it was our feeling that, at least in committee, we unanimously support remaining fare-free for the next fiscal year. And I think it is consistent with the region, other authorities in the region. So we just wanted to bring that forward and propose that as the Raleigh Transit Authority, we produce a letter that can be sent to council advising or suggesting or endorsing that we support fare-free ridership for FY23. So that is what, that's what I'd like to propose that we consider now, and we don't have a draft letter as such, but it's a fairly straightforward letter just saying that we support the idea of suspending fares for ridership for RTA for the next fiscal year.
I had a sort of an amendment to that, but if there's any other questions or comments about it first.
Our comments will be about your amendment, Karen.
No, so I'm fully supportive of recommending free fare for another fiscal year. I would like to send a directive and a recommendation in the letter that we really use this opportunity to advertise and market that the fare is free, like in a much more aggressive way than we have been doing so far. I think it's such an opportunity to encourage ridership, and we have been saying it, but I think a really directed campaign that, because it's sort of, but we've been adding it into existing advertising, but I think, and I'm suggesting this based on comments that I've been hearing at past meetings too, that it's such an opportunity to encourage people, hey, try the bus. Gas is expensive now, and the fares continue to be free. I think most people still have no idea that the bus is free. Like people know in Chapel Hill the bus is free, and so it's an opportunity on a
Well, I
number
think
of
I have a
fronts.
question that goes back to marketing, so I'll hold my thoughts until we come to marketing.
I'm happy to hear your
Well,
comments.
I think because, remember, I had talked about this before, where advertising to WRL traffic report, and we're only targeting one segment on the radio, one department. You're missing a lot of people on who we're marketing to. So a lot of people don't listen to the radio, don't listen to WRL traffic report. So it's like, where are the gaps? It's like, okay, can we market it other ways, other radio stations, other avenues, as well as TV, maybe put a banner on the TV? Because again, I think overall, we don't market ourselves at all. Not just, the fair. I think this is a good opportunity to market Go Raleigh, period. Where are the missed opportunities? When I come into the airport, I know nothing about Go Raleigh. I know nothing about the transit system. That is one opportunity
Yeah.
we should be marketing Raleigh
So,
or other avenues. So
Let's table that comment till we get to the marketing report, because
That's what I said.
I'd like to continue this conversation.
That's
So
what I said.
not to hold up finance.
Jen, did you?
I was just gonna say, can we just add a statement to our previous budget approval? Is that simpler than writing a memo for staff? Because we just endorsed that by approving the budget that doesn't have it in there. So can we just go back and make an addendum to say the strong support of the sentence that Linda said that was awesome?
Like the budget, and then say like
It
we
is very
support
important
fair
that
free,
fair
and then
free-
highlighter.
Yes.
Yeah, crayon.
I mean, we
I
did
know
soft
you use
say it by
crayons a
approving
lot,
the budget. We soft said it by approving the budget, right? So we're just saying it louder, and I wholeheartedly agree we should say it.
I second that.
All right.
I definitely accept that.
So, do we want to, because we don't have a letter right now, do we want to structure this as a motion to support sending a letter or a statement that we endorsed? Something.
I'm just gonna go, and you guys edit me if I want. I think we just add that the Raleigh Transit Authority strongly supports the fare free being included in the 23 budget, and we just make sure that that is highlighted at the top of the budget, and we amend the previous motion
Rather than
rather than a separate letter.
when staff is short.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
Over well.
All right, that is the motion. Do I have a
Second.
second? All right. Do we have any discussion on that? I'm writing this down, by the way. No? All right. By a show of hands, all those in favor? All right. That passes unanimously. All right. That is great. Is there anything else you want to bring up for finance policy?
Nope, that concludes our action items and our committee work for the past month. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Then let's move on to marketing.
Oh, sorry. Hello. Karen Wrench, Chair of the Marketing Committee. In addition to the updates we've already heard, the other thing that we discussed at Marketing Committee was specifically about our latest advertising program campaign that we're doing this year, which is the WREL traffic report. And I did want to tell you that staff tells us some good news that since we have been spending money for the special traffic report ads, along with all the other go Raleigh, go Durham, go Cary, et cetera, that we have seen on average for both February and March each month an additional about 800 new website visits. And that is, they took that data based on the how many web hits we've had within 15 minutes after the radio spots aired. Does that make sense? So basically, what kind of new web traffic have we seen immediately following those morning and evening hits? And as a reminder, each of the goes are spending $22,000 for these radio spots for the whole year. And we get about, and I could be wrong on the numbers, there are, these are 10-second spots, and there's 16 title mentions per day, right? Is that about right?
16 per month per agency.
16 per month
Yeah,
per.
so that's the longer when it just, so throughout the days, we all get mentioned, brought to you by Go Raleigh. The 16 spots are much longer. They're more of an ad, so that's when we have talked about, for example, we did on Transit Appreciation Day, we announced that during the gas situation that I guess is currently still going on. We're talking about, fare free, it's cheaper than gas, that sort of thing.
And so they're rotating messages, and they're updating them based on kind of what's been happening, and will continue to do so. So it's an opportunity to keep refreshing the message throughout the year. And I do want to say that when we started the Wake Transit Plan campaign to build ridership in July of last year, the staff did have and continues to have a strategy to hit different markets. This is just the latest new addition, and it's been a combination of billboards, print, digital, and radio, and it's a variety of print outlets as well as radio outlets, taking into account different demographics, because absolutely we shouldn't just be hitting one demographic. This is just the newest piece, and it was an opportunity that was offered to us because it's tied with traffic reporting. And should we continue to diversify our advertising? Absolutely. And the Wake Transit Plan marketing campaign is going to end in July, right? Because it was this one-year campaign. So, and the reason I've been asking a lot of questions about the marketing budget is I think we need to continue to have a marketing plan moving forward that is addressing different demographics and different outlets, and it's going to cost money. And I do think that this particular traffic report sponsorship, to me, the data is showing that it's making a difference.
Well, is that a combination of, I didn't mean to cut you off. So I know that WRL did a news study too, a report on that. So do you think that could have been a uptake at the same time as the radio reporting?
Yeah, so radio, so the easiest thing to track is digital, right? So you're on a site, you can see that you came from CBS and ended up at our site. So how we've gathered the numbers their team has is, again, that 15-minute block after it airs, so you can tell who's come in that time period. But say all of a sudden you don't want to do a 30-minute commute, you look at it when you get home after your 30-minute commute, we're not going to get that stat either, because they can't look at it indefinitely. So that's really the best we have there, and it's not going to be, like you said, accurate. But I absolutely think some of the news stories we got brought stuff as well.
Right, because I can't see that coming from radio be an uptick, because again, you're only focusing on someone's in their car during that time, during traffic. So they're not going to be on their phone to click. So I think the uptick had to do with the gas prices almost hitting $5, and there was news stories on that. But I guess, again, asking if we're using WRL, can we use all avenues of WRL's media? So they have the radio, they have the sports, but they have other avenues. So are we looking to expand that out, or split that out into?
The last radio we did sports, and we did 101.5. This is the traffic sponsorship that is 101.5. Those ended. We did those for 6 months. Again, and we have digital and print and everything else. And I mean, I could tell you who was visiting. So if there was an article out, you could pretty much figure that out, because you could see where something was coming from.
Right.
But again, they would have to click on something. Does that make, I'm trying to make some sense here.
And
So
I
again,
got
with
you.
that
Yeah, I got you.
15-minute block, we know, say, we got one of our 16 slots, right? It advertised at 5 p.m. traffic hour. They're looking from 5 to 5:15 on that exact day.
And also, I wanted to add that since we started the marketing campaign to build ridership, the staff has been tracking our website hits, and we've seen every month an increase to our website overall, and so which says to me that the marketing, spending the money on the marketing is making a difference. I mean, for example, we've seen like this was, which I'm trying, I write this down at each of our marketing committee meetings. Sometimes we've seen like a 29% increase from last year, up to a 50-some% increase in web hits from last year, from a year previous. And that's from a multifaceted campaign approach. So we do need to look at, and that is your intent based on our last meeting, to when this campaign is over, to see which outlets are making a difference, and how. And then for me, the question is, what's our plan moving forward? How are we going to spend the next $50,000 plus whatever the other $150,000 that Go Raleigh has? That we need to be thinking, okay, where do we go from here? And particularly based on what our priorities are, and from what I heard at the retreat, marketing and building ridership and awareness about our new routes and frequencies is definitely one of our big priorities. So,
and I said this at the WIC Transit meeting too. It's like we promote to our riders, but we don't promote to new riders. So we need to consider everybody in the whole marketing plan. So we want everyone to ride the bus. So
would you like to join the marketing committee?
I have a question related
We
to
have
that.
a vacancy.
She's already agreed to come to Route.
one meeting, I'll hop over after
You
the
can
next
be
one.
on more than one
Sometimes
committee.
you just have to go to more than one.
Yeah.
I did have a question related to that as well, which was thinking about cross-departmentally. The city puts out a lot of stuff on all of their different channels, and Go Raleigh is awesome about putting things on our social media, but Katie Dabrowski's team and other people in community engagement also do things. And when they're hosting events, they're not per se they put parking directions, for example, at the Raleigh Union Station event last night on the website, like, you can park here. And I was like, you could also ride the bus or the train there. But that wasn't there. And so, like, if we could just think through some of those cross-departmental, not paid advertising chances to catch people's attention about the option of riding the bus for free, I think maybe that's something you guys need to discuss in committee, but just pointing it out.
And just piggyback on that. That's what I talk about, what missed opportunities, where we could just advertise ourselves. So like when we had the big Dreamville Festival, Go Raleigh went right past it. That could have been like free advertising, take the bus, instead of people finding shuttles or walking long walks. So it's like all these free festivals, the city actually, not just you guys, but the city can actually promote their own transportation system. So.
And some of us tried to tell Dreamville that, and they didn't listen.
Well, they made money off of it, so they didn't want that.
Quickly, just to point out, if you're interested in the numbers, we do put them in the monthly reports that you all get, and I've done it annually. So right now you would only see the last 3 months, but I have from last year's if you want to go back and look. And you can definitely, as Karen mentioned, when we started rolling out the campaign, you can see some numbers. They are dropping a little bit because with the amount of money we had, some things had to stop at 6 months due to the cost.
Money, which is why I want more money.
We're gonna find Karen some money for marketing.
She's gonna find us some money.
The advertising budget, revenue.
That's right.
So anyhow, so that's the marketing report. But also, I did want to mention that I did proactively submit a letter to the editor that got printed about because the News and Observer printed a fairly poorly written story about using public transit that was very confusing. So I sent a letter just trying to emphasize how easy it is to take the bus, and that they can go to goraleigh.org to get all their information.
Very nice.
So
Thank you for your activeness.
it's what I do.
There we go. All right. Anything else on marketing or any questions for the committee? Anyone want to go in with me on buying Andrea a T-shirt that says "Don't forget Go Raleigh" and have her walk through communications a couple times a week?
I would do it.
All right. Moving on to route committee. We had a couple things that we went to. I'm not going to hit Most of them, I'm going to go high level just because it is almost 6 o'clock, and I think staff wants and us want to get home. Quick couple things. Go Raleigh TransDev staff are preparing accident and safety reports that will appear in our performance data. Please look out for that. We've asked for not just accidents where, for buses, hitting parked cars or stuff like that, that just things that happen when you have, 100 vehicles on the road every day doing millions of miles. We've also asked for incident reports to be included, so we have a better understanding of what our operators are dealing with, if we need to run courtesy campaigns or stuff like that. So they are going and looking at that. Wake Transit Plan is currently in their FY23 draft plan. So they are looking at what routes and what they're going to fund. I believe the comment period is still open, I want to say. So we can, you can find that, and we please definitely comment. That gets done through Wake Transit, but we definitely have a seat at the table. So definitely put your 2 cents in. And the
Comment online?
yes, comment online. It is online. That is the best way. There's actually a survey, and David is coming to the podium.
The draft plan comment period has closed.
Oh, the draft plan.
Yeah, the TPAC next Wednesday, I believe, if that's the 20th, we'll be actually voting on the recommended plan. Then that recommended plan will go back out for public comment.
Got it. Okay. Got it. And then we can tweak it at that point. So look out for that.
You can let us know when that is.
I
Mr.
will
Chair.
definitely, yeah. I'll
Okay.
put that out there. The only other thing is just an update that I updated Route with, which was that staff is kindly starting to talk to Wake County Public Schools about sort of how to manage and get more high school and middle schoolers onto public buses. That's an ongoing thing, and we'll come back with updates as it starts to progress. It's very, 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 very much in its infancy, and we will hopefully get some good results as things move on.
And surely there was some lessons learned when they were first starting the youth pass, and there was a round of, this was like 3 years ago now.
Well, we can definitely, yeah, we'll look into that.
There was a big effort, particularly Big O Triangle, around the schools, and I don't know where that stands now, but I know that there is certainly support among some of the school board members.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, that's awesome. Do you have a question?
Yeah, just a question. So this is just to increase the number of high school students that are riding the bus?
This is a look at possibly figuring out ways to get students who may or may not be currently served by school buses onto public buses, and maybe get rid of duplication of services through buses. So, if we can easily get them onto a school bus that easily gets them to school, then maybe we don't need to send a bus to their stop. So saving taxpayers money in different ways. So.
And just an idea, because I know everybody's thinking about pipeline development. While we're talking to Wake County, we could be trying to introduce them to careers that's also in transportation. So
I love that.
that may be a thing to think about.
Yeah, I like that a lot. All right. So is there, that is the, are there any comments or questions on route committee? Okay. All right. Then moving on to our last piece of concluding remarks. Are there anything that board members have that they want to say or comment or anything like that? All right. The only thing I will put in is that I'm hoping for the ears of TransDev that that there's a way to provide the operator in the Sunday accident some paid time leave for mental health because they probably will need some of that, and that is something that we should be taking very seriously. So I'm going to put that out there into the ether. Any staff, any comments? All right, I'm rushing you towards the door, so all right, cool. All right, thank you. Then we are concluded and we are adjourned.